Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice, gigantic 13-game Major League Baseball slate. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It helps the channel a lot. Really do appreciate it. So this slate is kind of wonky. It's definitely going to be a slate that I'm going to play wider on. It's just so many games, it's hard to pinpoint really good options, but we do have some good plays today. So I do like this slate better than most 13-game slates, but I still play light on these because there's just too much variance. With that said, let's go ahead and get into it. So the weather does have some concerns today as well. The Yankees game has some issue against Texas. That's probably the riskiest game there. The Houston Boston game has some risk as well as does the Atlanta Colorado game. Now this Atlanta Colorado game's in Colorado, so do keep that in mind. Obviously a big pitching park there. So this slate does have some potential for super high scoring, as our pitchers are pretty solid today. There are some risks involved there, but I do think that there's several good options, and then we have some good contrarian plays there as well. So let's go ahead and get into our pitchers. So our top overall play is Flaherty for the Dodgers. Now he's got the best K rate on the slate. Now he doesn't have the highest K rates. Like this is not a super high K rate slate. But he does have really good, and he's got a very favorable match against Pittsburgh, and he's got a good ceiling for this game. He's done well as of late, especially at home, so I think he's got a lot of potential here. Uh, he has given up some home runs, and Pittsburgh does have O'Neal Cruz, who could definitely hit a home run here. But I do think that he's a solid play on the slate, even though he's the most expensive option. Another guy you can consider as a top tier play is a Zach Wheeler for Philly. He's got a decently favorable match against Arizona, and I think his ceiling is probably a little bit higher here than Flaherty. He's also done well against Arizona before. He has scored 32 fantasy points last time he played them. His K rate is very similar, but it's a little bit of a riskier matchup for him. Uh, uh, I don't think that he's got a huge ceiling when it comes to the strikeouts, but I think he's got a pretty decent one for the slate. So he's definitely a solid contrarian play off Flaherty. If you don't want to use Flaherty, then use Wheeler as your P1 play. Another guy you could look at though would be Carlos Rodon for the Yankees. He does have a tougher match against Texas, who have some bats that can score. He also has given up more home runs than some of the other guys, and he's not quite as consistent. His K rate is also a little bit weaker today, but he does look good, so it's hard to ignore that. He's also got a high ceiling because occasionally he does have big strikeout games. It's definitely a higher risk game than the top two guys, but he's definitely a good contrarian play from that point of view. Also, look at Robbie Ray for the Giants. Now, he's somebody I kind of like a lot today. He has had some, he's only pitched 3 games so far, but he's been really solid in 2 of the 3. Even though he does have some home run risk here, Detroit has really been struggling, so I think he's in a very favorable situation. This game is at home for him, which theoretically should be beneficial, but in his 1 game at home so far, he did struggle, but I think his strikeout potential today is a little bit better than what is kind of projected, and as long as he can limit the earned runs, he should be fine as a good P1 or even a P2 play because he's cheap enough at $8,600 that you can do that. Now, some other players that we can look at, Miller for Seattle. He does have a difficult matchup against the Mets, who have had some ups and downs, but he does have good metrics for this game. He's definitely worth a look. His K rate is just good enough to be considerable for the slate. His ownership will be a little bit lower too, which can give you some potential. Looking at Talion for the Chicago Cubs. He's also a kind of an extreme GPP play. He's got a favorable match against the White Sox. Now, his strikeout potential is rather low, but it does look better than I expected him to look, and his price point is pretty fair here. So those are my top overall plays on the slate. I think there's a couple guys that are high risk, high reward on the slate as well, but I do have one, I think, Hail Mary play. Where is he? Okay, yeah, Holmes for Atlanta. He does have some interesting potential against Colorado, who he had 1 start against Milwaukee that he did pretty solid. He didn't do well against Miami, but I think he has some potential here against Colorado. Though this game is in Colorado, so that's why he's a Hail Mary play. He's very boom or bust. Um, I do have a couple guys that I'm just going to roll off real quick that have high risk, high reward potential. Blanco, Keller, Lorenzen, Barrios, Quintana, Bradford, Spears, Spence, and Nelson are kind of high risk, high reward type plays that have probably won't do well, but definitely have that capability on this particular slate. Let's go ahead and look at our catchers here. So catching today is not that deep, surprisingly, though it is a little, it's okay. It's just not that deep for a slate like this. Uh, JT Realmuto, who has been absolutely phenomenal in the last couple games, is also really looking good today. Now, he hasn't been great all season, really, but he has been hitting the ball a little bit better recently, so he's definitely somebody to consider today with some home run upside. Doesn't have the best home run upside, though, on the slate, but he's definitely decent, and he's a good option. But I do like uh, Sean Murphy for Atlanta a little bit better. He's a little bit cheaper as well. Now, he has struggled this season, but the matchup metrics here are very good for good hitting potential, especially against Colorado. At Colorado, doesn't really have the home run metric today that I'd love being in Colorado, but he's still really solid, and he can definitely get one over the wall there. So he's definitely worth a look from that perspective. Wilson Contreras. This is Wilson. This is for St. Louis. He actually does look really good today. He's got a really good hit rate for this game, and so I think he's somebody you have to consider, though he's fairly expensive considering that. A good value play here is Connor Wong for the Boston Red Sox. They project really well as a team, and he has really good hitting metrics for this game as well. The home run metrics are kind of weak today overall, so Wong, though, does look really good, and he's somebody that's nice and cheap and can help you at other positions. Now, the ownership, Sean Murphy and Alejandro Kirk, low-owned upside guys. Tyler Stevenson and Shea Langurley are kind of contrarian options there. So looking at first base, Ohtani, obviously, he's got the crazy metrics today. He does look really good, but he's $6,600. He has to hit a home run to pay off, and he definitely doesn't do that every single game. In fact, in the last 2 games, he hasn't done anything. A little bit of concern that he's been kind of whiffing a lot. Now, he's not getting a lot of strikeouts, but he's definitely a little bit riskier on this one. Bryce Harper also fits the bill as a really solid play with good hitting metrics today. He's a little pricey for not having the huge home run metric, though, so to keep that in mind, but he's definitely capable here. And then Matt Olson for Atlanta, also somebody to consider on the slate, as he does have good upside on this one, especially there in Colorado. Now, Josh Naylor is a guy that I think is very decent for a core play. Now, the contingency here is that I really wasn't going to use him as a core play, but I just feel like he's going to hit a home run. And so that is clearly the reasoning here. His home run metric is decent today, and he just looks like he's primed for one on this particular slate. So I think he's somebody that I'm going to try to roster decent amount, though there's plenty of guys available at this position. You can also even mix in Connor Wong at first base if you really want to save money, because there's not a lot of super value plays on this one at this position. But Freddie Freeman, Connor Wong, Vinny Pasquantino, and Vlad Jr. also fit well at this position, and definitely ways to go. Looking at second base, we do like Jose Altuve quite a decent amount today. He's got really good hitting metrics. He hadn't hit home run in a few games, but he's definitely got some potential today, though it's not as great as it is sometimes. Now, I really think Cleveland is going to be a sneaky team on this slate, and Andres Jimenez for Cleveland looks interesting against Garland today. He's got decent metrics for this game. Not great, but decent, and he's got some good hitting potential. He's had some multi-hit games lately. He definitely looks like he's primed to have a solid game here. Some other guys I like here, though. Stott for Philly. He looks like a nice value play on the slate. He's got good hitting metrics as well, and he's a really solid situation, and so I think he's a positive play on this one. And then Sogard for Boston's kind of a punt cheap play. He's only played a couple games, but he's managed to score some decent fantasy points. He is a decent young player, so I think he's somebody you can consider as a very cheap, kind of contrarian play on the slate. But that price will help you pay up at other positions, and he can fit at second base or shortstop, and so he's definitely somewhat interesting, at least there. Looking at third, I should say Marcus Semien, Whit Merrifield, Gleyber Torres, and Brendan Donovan also look solid here, with Gleyber Torres and Michael Massey being the top owned options, but there's nobody that's really a clear-cut ownership on that position. Rafael Devers for Boston looks solid for third base. He has absolutely fantastic metrics for home runs and everything else. I think he's in a solid position to have a good game here, though he is extremely expensive. I don't think he's a must play, even though he's fair because he's not as expensive as as he has been. He's been over $6,000 for a lot of the season. There's a decent amount of guys at this position that look okay, so he's not a must play. But Austin Riley is another one. Now I do like Devers more than Riley, but Riley does have a favorable matchup uh, in Colorado, and he does have some home run upside here. And he's been hitting the ball extremely well lately, so he's definitely worth a look from that perspective. Ryan McMahon is probably my favorite play from Colorado today. Uh, he has a favorable matchup against Atlanta. This game being at home also does help him, and he has that good metrics here. He has struggled lately, though, so do keep that in mind. He's kind of high risk, high reward. Alex Bregman also looks interesting for Houston as he has good contrarian metrics here. Now, his price has come up a little bit, which I don't like, but he does have good hitting potential on the slate. The ownership will be Austin Riley and Jake Berger, but Jose Ramirez, Vlade Jr., and Josh Jung also have some potential here. So let's look at the shortstops. I do like Bobby Witt Jr. a lot today. He's going to be hard to roster. The metrics for him today are actually not all that particularly great, but he's hit the ball very well lately, so he's definitely somebody you have to consider. I should say he's hit the ball well all season long. Ella De La Cruz, though, his batting metrics today are absolutely phenomenal. He hasn't been bad on the road either. In fact, he's got a better fantasy points per game and batting average on the road, which is a little shocking considering he plays at the Great American Ballpark. He's also been absolutely insane against Milwaukee this season. If you can find a way to roster him in a couple of GPP lineups, he's definitely a good option. Him and Ohtani definitely have those metrics off the charts today, so he's definitely there. O'Neal Cruz is the one guy I think that could get to Flaherty today, and so keep that in mind here. He's got good home run metrics for the slate, but he's kind of a mirror bust play. And then a kind of a value play here will be Volpe for the Yankees. He is day to day, but if he does start today, then he'll be somebody I would definitely consider on the slate. You could also look at Sogard as a shortstop as well, or you could look at Trey Turner as a contrarian play. The ownership here, Orlando Arcia, does have some potential. Bobby Witt Jr., Trey Turner, Mason Wynn, and then low-owned upside guys, Ella De La Cruz, who I think is really sneaky today, Corey Seager. Look at outfielders. Let's see here. Hang on one second. I'm sorry. Because I wanted to put. Okay. Looking at outfield today, we do have Ohtani at the top here. His metrics are just absolutely phenomenal. Definitely somebody to consider here. Jordan Alvarez, Kyle Schwarber, and Marcell Ozuna and Jarren Duran are my top 5 expensive plays on the slate for this position. They all look really good. I'm kind of fading the Yankees today. They don't look all that great against Bradford, even though he's not that good of a pitcher. They don't really have that home run upside today that I expected. So I think that they're a little bit more avoidable, but they definitely are more than capable of hitting those home runs. As for some value plays here, we do like Willie Abreu. Now he doesn't have the best matchup here, but his metrics were really good today. He didn't start the last 2 games, so keep that in mind. But if he draws a start today, his potential is very high, and he's definitely worth a look here. I just wanted to note it already looks like the Yankees-Rangers game for later has been postponed. So do keep that in mind if you so we can avoid those Yankees players after all. I just got the notification on that, so do keep that in mind here. Then we'll also look at some other guys at the outfield with Brandon Marsh for Phillies. He looks really interesting today. He's kind of got a good home run metric, and so he's definitely worth a look there. I think Philadelphia is going to be a sneaky team on the slate. Jared Kalenic for Atlanta. He's got some really good home run metrics for this game in Colorado. He's been hitting the ball up and down throughout the season. He has been hitting better recently, though I don't necessarily think a multi-hit game. I do think he has some home run potential, though. And then Randy Arizona, he looks interesting for Seattle as kind of a mirror bust play on the slate with home run upside. Masataka Yoshida and JJ Bleday and Gerard Encarnacion all look like decent plays as contrarian plays on the slate. The ownership here, Ohtani, Varsho, Adam Duvall, Jorge Soler, and Marcell Ozuna, MJ Melendez, Whit Merrifield, and Brendan Donovan. Low-owned guys, Spencer Steer and TJ Friedel. So with that said, guys, Like I said, this slate is going to be kind of crazy. Good news is we already know that this Texas New York Yankees game is postponed, so you can avoid those players. But it should be a pretty wild slate. It's going to be a super high scoring one. Any positions you can go cheaper on today. The positions I would probably go a little bit cheaper on today might be second base or shortstop, but especially second base. I think shortstop you can definitely go more expensive. Also, outfield is a definite wise place to kind of go cheap, and also catcher. So probably catcher and shortstop are the best, and then maybe at least one or two of your outfielders being cheap would definitely be the way to go today. I think second base, there's not a whole lot of expensive options there that look all that great to start. So whereas like shortstop, it does have it, but you could definitely go cheap there if you wanted. But second base definitely a good place to be cheap. Catcher also, and then outfield I wouldn't go like sub 3,000 maybe unless you want to go with Gerard and Encarnacion. But I think there's a couple of decent guys there as well. With that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.